I start with an apology. This is not a presentation that includes any graphs and nothing about polynomial regression, about the mismatch between two variables, the person and the environment. Nor is it a sales pitch in respect of the phrase I'm going to use throughout the presentation of Netnology. Since preparing the proposal, I've come a bit further on in my research. I'd also like to present myself as a PhD student, getting towards the end of my studies. I'm going into or finishing off my data analysis, so I'd appreciate as much feedback from you as you're prepared to give. I'm also fortunate in some ways to have both of my supervisors here, John and Danny. John hasn't seen this yet, so I'm expecting missiles perhaps to be coming this way. Everything is constructive. My PhD questions I've proposed are those I present there. I'm not going to go through them in any great depth. I am looking at misfit. Now, why am I looking at misfit and what perspective am I looking at misfit from? So I'm one of those people that's answered the call to investigate the causes of perceived misfit. Because the outcomes we have heard this morning, especially from John, can both be serious both for the individual and for the organisation. So my contribution I would like to see here as having something directly relevant to organisational behaviour aspects. We've seen about the serious positions of withdrawal of organisational citizenship behaviours, perhaps some bullying behaviours. We know about stress. We know about ill health. We know about intent to turn over. But we want to know from the individuals themselves rather than calculating, trying to calculate variables between a P and an E. So from that aspect, let's go further on. I did say in the paper that I was going to talk briefly about why I'm using qualitative methodology, but I take that as read. We know the disadvantages of some in that we qualitative researchers such as myself tend to use small, in-depth approaches to small numbers of people. That in itself has difficulty in obtaining those samples, which have come across myself. Studies might end up being more of a description of what someone said. The researcher's perception of what someone said is then imposed on what is written. So I wish to go expand upon, become, dare I say, more generalisable in this qualitative approach. So how did I'm going to present how I have done it, where I am now, and again welcoming your feedback. So yes, I'm seeking to find from the perspective of the person, of how they perceive them. I've put down that social constructionism. I'm using a grounded theory methodology, which perhaps has become another millstone around my neck, but I'm on the way to doing that. So it's very much from the perspective of the person. I then introduced something called netnography. So my brief outline, as you can see there, is to describe what it is, what it's all about, most certainly why use it, the most important so what, and the applications as I've presented there. So netnography, what is it? It's it is an approach very much used in the marketing discipline, where, as it says there, you take ethnographical methods and approaches and apply them online to examine online communities around certain areas of interest. As I said there, to try and detect patterns, Coca-Cola, as presented by John this morning, one of the leaders in using netnography, going into forums and seeing what happens. I have a colleague at Coventry University that used to pay his rent out of the comments he would make to online discussion forums, and how he was then tracked by advertisers because he became an important poser of statements. Online, I would hope to identify, track down these sensitive topics, because people, as we know from John, don't want to admit that they are a misfit. They want to hide. Organisations don't want to say that they have got people as misfits in their organisations, because it would mean that they would have to do something about it. And quite often, from what I've been seeing, what I've been looking at, they don't know what to do. Am I going online to look at what people have said? I would hopefully get very much of a deep insight into what they've said, because people aren't sitting in front of a researcher, being presented with questions which might not always be appropriate, because you don't know what you don't know as a researcher. But I can capture that from someone who has quite freely given a statement about the way that they are feeling. Before anybody asks, there is an ethical issue that I have addressed. We've probably all read about the Harvard University publication when it examined Facebook comments, and the ethical issue there was blown apart because people's identities were determined. Going through the ethical issues, I have been signed off for ethics because I'm using what's now regarded as public domain knowledge. Now, why have I done that? I did seek to find my own participants. I've already done the LinkedIn. Please, whatever you say, talk to me about misfit. It is entirely confidential. Nothing. I applied to 3,500 of Coventry University's alumni. I had one response, and they were a lunatic, so I couldn't take him board. I've used the Facebook links. People are frightened about talking about misfits, and that's not necessarily something that I thought, because they didn't want to put anything down. So I sought to use something called Netnology instead. I scrape the web for commentary about organisational misfits, about a string of such phrases that I have put in. Web scraping is the new thing on the block. We have the huge World Wide Web out there. There must be thousands of people commenting about something at any one time. And I've used public access forums. Why have I done that? Well, I was encouraged to do that, apart from the fact that, and I can say this in this closed room, I'm restricted by time, restricted by effort trying to find people to talk to. So I am borrowing from the marketing discipline to use the new SMC that's talked about earlier. And at the Research Methods Festival in Cass Business School earlier on this year, it was very much presented as the new kid on the block. Not to get excited about it, about thinking, oh, it's a new flavour, but hey, I think it's worth looking at. And why did I do that? It's in real time. Instead of having to rely on people's memories of an instance of where they felt like a misfit, or where perhaps they were triggered into misfit. We all know that we seek to limit the negative effects of sometimes very painful memories through our own process of cognitive dissonance. But if you can capture people who have said, right, that's it, I've had a really bad day at work, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to let somebody know how I'm feeling. So we've got our real time. It could be anywhere in the world. So I have a chance of not just concentrating on, say, Western Europe or the UK or America, and going across the world. I've given some references there for following on later. Now, the participation in social networks, I was going to talk about some depth, I'm not going to, because to join a social network, use the word you have to join. And by joining a social network, before you can use any of the data, you have to announce yourself as a researcher, get ethics side off, and you've lost your participants. I found that already to my cost when trying to set up WordPress forums. Why do you want to do it? It does sound fantastic. 3 billion new consumers just for Marketeers. What does that say for us in OB? It just opens up all new ends of possibility. It gives us a chance to expand upon, to take our research methods into, let's say, the 21st century and get away from the over-reliance on these smaller sample sets. Because I would like to say here that, yes, I'm training to be an academic, but I'd like to think that what I'm doing does have a direct application into organisations now, such as when Ross was mentioned earlier when they're talking about trust, we've got 5% of people who are very disaffected. That can have a great impact on the organisation. So yeah, I'd like to make a difference. I've already mentioned about Marketeers, using that in their research. And then this is the point that, well, yes, I would like to have brought in music where we can particularly go where no one has gone before, to identify, to find out where these misfit people are, the people who are feeling that way. You've seen enough definitions about fit already. It's not about fit really that I'm going to talk about. I could have said, yeah, I've tricked you, I've done a polynomial regression already to satisfy number 2. But I am after, as Tony Wheeler points out, and as John would often say, and we've heard earlier on, people's perceptions of fit and or misfit are entirely personal to them. What's misfit for one might necessarily not be misfit for the other. And it is also, we suspect, multi-dimensional, rather like the jigsaw puzzle of 2 people's heads we said this morning. I've given you an example of what someone who posted something there. I'm going to be only 30 next year, and I still feel like a helpless junior high school person just trying to fit in. I feel like crap. Everyone else is having fun without me and doesn't care, no matter how hard I try to fit in with anyone else. People always say, always be yourself. Being myself gets me nowhere. So rather than feed on, all I wish is my life could be donated to someone who really needs it. Now that is someone that is feeling bad. And these are the people that I'd like to connect with. And I think it might take the misfit field somewhat forward. So as I mentioned earlier, by using, starting off with the Google search engine, I'm going out to identify not the closed forums, but the threads or the blogs where people might be talking about how they feel. Now, there are particular ones such as workrant.com. Has anybody been on that one? Well, I think they're like John's, all posting from John. People are swearing and they're ranting about their co-workers and their supervisors and how they're feeling and how they'd like to do something to the supervisor or manager. I've not gone there because I think that's a bit too over the top, unless somebody suggests that I should. I talked about ethics. Now moving on, because I seek to get more information from you perhaps than I would like I'm presenting to you. What have I been doing? I've created, because I'm using NVivo, to capture websites when I come across some of them now. How have I found some websites? I've got some search criteria. Organisational misfit, using both the S and the Z. I wish I fitted in at work. Outcast at work. Alienated. Because I'm doing grounded theory methodology, I'm snowballing off phrases that people have used and reviewers have used. So what might start off just as misfit, I've started using different phrases. And I then, when I came across a website, now it could be a website where a journalist or John or Danny might have posted an article in press about misfit. I go down to the forum at the bottom where people post, and I'll capture those and I will code them. And out of those, I've got some 100 or so sites so far. I did have 400 nodes. I cleaned them up down to 362. And at the stage of coding that I'm at the moment, I've got 10 categories. Now, within these categories, they will have 100 or so comments, which I have posted against that title. And this is my terminology. This is where I would appreciate some advice, especially after hearing about Hertzberg's two-factor theory. I'm thinking, yeah, some of these headings that I've got might hook in to that. And if we've got time, I could perhaps, quickly show you what I've got on one of them. Oh, I can't. I'm talking about my own computer's not blooming plugged in. Yeah, such as I've got misfits over time or trigger event. If I could give you some comments on that, whether it's an extrinsic, whether it's an intrinsic. Let me just get some. Two organisations merge, 2 offices merge, change of supervisor, change of team formation. We've got people who've been working in an organisation quite happily for 10 years, 20 years, something happens. And they suddenly feel like a misfit. We've got HR or management ineffective, where people have commented on the fact that their co-workers are clearly misfits. They're having a deleterious effect upon their co-workers, but nothing is being done about them. Therefore, management failure. And I have a very long list of the outcomes of misfit feelings. How do people feel? That's only at my first level of coding. I haven't as yet reached theoretical saturation. So I'm gone back into fields with a cleaned up list of search criteria. Again, I'd appreciate any change of wordings, but as I go back in, I've already done fitting with some things and people, misfitting in others. I've got a whole long list of websites that people are talking about being outside of the group, misfitting outside of the group. And that then lead me on to something else. So at the second stage, almost at theoretical saturation. So my questions to you are, there any indications of some theories or literature that I should be looking at? What's coming out for me at the moment is the in-group, out-group aspect, possibly social identity theory. With that, over to you. Any ideas of where I should be going next? Thank you.